Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of From Linear to Circular webinar series. My name is Ilma, and this is the first time I'm meeting you. I'm also part of the learning team as most of the hosts on this series, and I will be your co-host today. And we will be diving into the material that is one of the most ubiquitous and perhaps divisive on the planet, plastics. And we will be talking whether plastics have the future in the circular world. And I'm joined today by Monica, who will be co-hosting this session with me today. Welcome, Monica, and I'm sure people are already familiar with you. Do you want to unmute and say hi? I think you're still on mute.
Hi, Emma. Great to be. No, I should be okay.
No,
can you hear me?
We can hear you. Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, so great to be back, and I'm really looking forward to this topic. And we are really lucky to have 3 guest speakers today from the MPEG team with us. So looking forward to hear more. But before we get into the topic of the new plastics economy, just 2 shares up front, one of which is Zoom. You probably know Zoom by now, so I don't need to say much. Use the chat box for any topic related questions, and something different today will be taking at certain times the liberty to ask questions back to you, where again it would be great to have you post your answers on the chat box. The other thing, to just briefly say that we were really delighted to see so much homework come back in, and so many different posts from everybody. And so the homework was to watch the video on the 4.5 misconceptions of a circular economy. Lots of great contributions that I read, and we asked you on any reflections, disagreements, or add-ons. And yeah, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of responses. So overall, really positive, and people agreed that those misconceptions can easily be expected. But yeah, one disagreement was on the last misconception that people expect it will happen instantly. So Malvina said that she experienced it to be quite the opposite when she speaks to industries, and she said that she hears from industries a lot that it will take time, and that's something to expect. And then a couple of other misconceptions to be added. Erica said, be prepared to think in a new way, so tapping into the mindset change that's required. Helene said that CE would lead to lower growth through lower consumption. That's another misconception to add. And Johanna said that it's not all about the money, and that public sector innovation is also required. So thank you all for your contributions.
Thank you, Monica. And as you know, we also had a Monday question about extended producer's liability, and we will actually have a chat about that during the webinar, so we will cover a bit of that later on. And just a reminder, I'm sure that by now you're all very familiar with the Zoom, but if you have any questions in relation to today's topic, make sure to ask that question in the chat box. And if you have anything that needs clarifying or any links you'd like to receive, we have a team behind the scenes that are here to help you get answers. And also there will be a couple of questions that we will want you to engage with and share what you have to say about that. And we will do that by using chat as well. So make sure you're ready to type in your answers. But I think without any further ado, this is the time to introduce our guest speakers. And actually we have 3 of them today, and they all are from, as Monica said, MPEG, and that stands for New Plastics Economy. So we have Gaurans, we have Leela, and we have Juliet. So perhaps it would be great to just hear a little bit from each of them about what brought them here today. And Leela, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's actually really nice to be on a webinar where I can see lots of faces, because I've been doing quite a lot of webinars lately where it's sort of me just talking to a blank screen. So yeah, this is actually really nice. And really happy to be here with you today. And I'll be jumping back in the innovation section later in the session. Yeah, so for me, my journey to arriving and working in the New Plastics Economy Initiative probably starts back from when I was about 3 years old. So you're about to get my life story. So yeah, I grew up in Margaret River in Western Australia, and I had a mother who was an artist and a father who was a computer programmer. And, you know, growing up in this beautiful natural setting. And so I think from really young, I was really interested in how do we use science, technology, innovation to continue enjoying everything that a modern lifestyle brings us and really respect that, but also how to integrate and do that in a way that respects and restores the natural environment. And yeah, I was really interested in chemistry. I went on to study green chemistry, and initially got interested in plastics actually from a toxicity aspect, from a green chemistry aspect of how do we design industrial processes better. And also I then thought I might go and look at studying how to make the molecule that forms PET, a type of plastic, so how to make that from a bio-derived process. But yeah, so I then did some chemistry research, absolutely loved it, but felt like that was still a little bit too far down the research track, you know, too far from implementation, really for the speed of change that we need at the moment. So I decided to move into materials engineering, and went and did my PhD in Queensland, focusing on PHA, which is a plastic that's made by a bacteria, so biosourced and also biodegradable. Yeah, and in the first year of my PhD, the first New Plastics Economy Initiative report was published, and today we'll be going through basically what the outcomes of that report were. And that just completely changed the way I looked at the system. You know, and it was really for me a revelation, because it finally felt like here was a root cause solution versus, you know, just using science and engineering as a way to clean up the waste that we make. It was suddenly a way to use science, engineering, innovation as a way to design out waste and design a better system. And that's how I came to the New Plastics Economy Initiative, and it completely changed the course of my PhD as well. So yeah, really excited to then be picking up on some of the things I've learned through that and some of the innovation points a little bit later in the session. So that was the short version of my life story. Yeah, back to you, Irma.
Yes, it's what I love about these webinars. It's not only we ourselves as co-hosts, we learn more about the topic, but we also get to learn more about our colleagues, which is just great. And I loved Leanne's comment saying green chemistry, didn't even know that was a thing. That is so cool. So Lila, we will come back with all technical questions directly to you, and you'll be just the expert to help us answer that. Garance, what about you? What brought you here today?
Yeah, thanks, Ilma. Really happy to be here too. On my side, really different. I have a business background, but a while ago, I guess I had a kind of plastics realization moment. I used to live in Venice, in Italy, during a whole year. And I guess when you think about the city, whether you've been there or not, you think about quite a magical place, right? Well, I had the opportunity to take part into regular plastic cleanups of the lagoon once a month. And the first time, you know, I was really happy and really excited to dedicate my Saturday afternoon to collecting very old PET bottles in the canals of Venice. And I remember that day we collected 2 tons of plastics waste. And I was feeling kind of proud, you know. But then I came back every month, and every month the mountain of plastics waste actually didn't get any smaller, but actually got bigger. So yeah, I guess I realized that the problem was not really about collection, because given the mountains of waste, collection will just never be enough. And that's the point where I started to think very differently about the way we use our everyday products, and also the way they were designed. So I got more and more interested in plastics, and I found out about the foundation. And so, yeah, I thought that changing the plastic system was kind of a nice challenge to accept. And I guess that's why I'm working on the foundation in the New Plastics Economy team now. And I'm really looking forward to telling you more about this just later.
Yes, and your story really references very well to one of our principles, designing out waste and pollution rather than designing from waste, and designing from and finding ways to deal with all the current plastic pollution. It's not enough. We need to find ways to address the more systemic problem, and we will go deeper into that during the webinar today. Thanks, Garance. And the last but not the least, Juliet.
Hi, everyone. Very excited, of course, to be here as well. And yeah, actually, I can actually very relate to you, Garance, regarding this cleanup, because for me, like, my realization was when I was working in Cambodia. So I was part of an environmental organization. And even if I was aware of the plastic issue beforehand, being there really struck me, because you have plastic literally everywhere, in the river, on the ground. And yeah, so we were doing a lot of cleanups, of course. But then I realized that it's such a big system issue, and it's not just about like an issue there in Cambodia or in developing country, which often like the blame is put on this country, which is completely unfair because this country, like you go back, I don't know, like decades ago, they didn't have any plastic and they used to throw their waste on the soil, but it was what? Banana peel or other organic waste. So it would biodegrade, but then we imported actually plastic there. And there is no education there to actually know the impact of plastic. There is no collection system. And then we also import a lot of our waste now there in this country. So yeah, so it's a whole like global system issue that we need to tackle. And yeah, so this realization brought me to work in this field and come to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. And yeah, great to have you three with us today. But before we dive deeper into the topic, I'd like to ask you we have asked you what's on top of your mind when you are thinking about plastics. And let's start with the session to see what actually came up for the audience. And so what are the 2 words that come to mind when you were thinking about plastics?
And yes, we have this word cloud. And to be honest, I felt it myself as well. And my words were pollution and cheap. And they're both are quite visible. So a lot of people said the same. So pollution and waste and recycling definitely stand out. Any other comments or observations?
Well, it's interesting that misunderstood is also standing out and challenge.
Long ocean litter, a lot of them. So this is really about the current system of plastic and all the problems that we see in regards to plastic right now. And we actually put a lot of time thinking about or trying to understand the system of plastic before trying to find ways to transform that system. And Juliet, I think this is where we will start with you to tell us a bit more about how does this current system of plastic look like right now?
Yeah, so let me just share my screen.
Yeah, and I'll stop sharing this one.
Works well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Actually, it's, oh, sorry, it's this one, sorry. So yeah, so of course, plastic has actually a lot of advantages. It's lightweight, cheap, it's used across many applications. Actually, I'm just seeing a comment from Sophie that says that plastic is a great material. The problem is its use, and I cannot agree more. And that's also what the foundation found when it did this report in 2016, looking deeper into the issue of plastic and realized that actually the very linear take, make, waste system is the problem when we talk about plastic. And you can see in this visual, yeah, this actually very linear system where every year we produce around 78 million tons of plastic packaging. And most of it is coming actually, well, 98% is coming from virgin feedstock. So it's basically new material from petroleum. And you can see in the upper loop that even if actually we have been recycling for years, only 14% gets collected for recycling, which is really low. And most staggering of all is actually only 2% gets closed loop recycled. So meaning that it goes back to packaging. And in a circular economy, of course, we want to focus on this closed loop recycling. Well, in addition to other, but we prefer closed loop recycling versus cascaded recycling, which you can see here, it's 8%. So it's cascading recycling is basically transforming plastic into other products such as t-shirts or bench, for instance.
So is that more like downcycling?
Yeah, exactly. That's another word. And when we look at the other, like the right side of the visual, we can see that actually most of the plastic packaging goes to landfill. A bit goes to incineration, 14%, or energy recovery, which are both quite linear system and quite inefficient use of our resources. And I was quite surprised actually to see that 32% gets leaked. So I thought at first, okay, just a little bit get leaked into the environment, but actually it's 32%, which is crazy. It's more than recycled. So currently there is one truck load of plastic that goes to the ocean every minute. And if we follow current prediction, that would be 4 per minute by 2050, resulting, as I'm sure many of you are aware, that we will have more plastic than fish in the ocean by then. So yeah, so it's a really like system issue as we can see it. And as we mentioned before, end of pipe solution won't be sufficient. So we really need to rethink the system by keeping, of course, the advantages of plastic, but by addressing actually the drawbacks of its use.
When I look at this diagram, for me, this is like a running tap where the water doesn't stop running. And you know, no matter what we do with this water, it's about how do we close the tap and how do we close all that leakage. So we need to look at all the solutions that are, as we call it, upstream, rather than thinking what to do with all this water that comes out of it.
Yeah, you wouldn't just mop the floor like endlessly if you keep the tap running. You need to really work at the source, right? So
yeah.
So we are really keen to understand of what the circular economy lens could look like when we look at this. And before going into that, we want to also ask our participant or the audience to what comes to your mind. Are you more optimistic or pessimistic about the ability to address environmental problems associated with plastic? So have a think and use the chat box to write a few comments on where you are at with that topic.
So actually, I want to experiment something. So if you click the gallery view so that you can see everyone, and how about we do the thumbs up? So if you're optimistic, do the thumbs up. If you're pessimistic, do the thumbs down. And you know, and then we have the entire spectrum. So keep your thumb, then you can just scroll through the feed and let's see. So a lot of people thumbs up. So in this window, there are more thumbs up and quite a few thumbs down. In the second window, yeah, this is not scientific data, but my sense is that we have slightly few more optimists rather than pessimists.
For those who are still looking, the thumbs up, thumbs down one, if you look at the participants list, you'll find under go faster, go slower, another click to click the thumbs up or thumbs down symbol.
Oh, right. There was another way. Oh, we'll find new options. Great. So I would say on average, we're slightly more optimistic than pessimistic. So Juliette, I guess this is where we bring another question for you to tell us more about how the future of plastics in the circular world could look like. And look, remembering the questions that people already asked on the Slack, there were a couple that might be interesting to bring them in. And let's say Maria was asking whether the plastics should be banned altogether. So maybe there's no future for plastics. Or whether we need to find ways to keep the value of plastic and use it appropriately, as Megan was asking. So how do we formulate the vision for plastics?
They are actually great question, and I think they introduce very well what we want to bring up. Let me see if, yes. So the new plastic economy is based, of course, on the same principle as circular economy. So where design actually plays a huge role, and design and production. So we want to design a product that can be reused, which is the first inner loop, and then recycled to create an efficient after-use plastic economy. So having also the system in place, right? The infrastructure to deal with these materials. Then you can see on the bottom right, we also need to drastically reduce the leakage. So this is done, for instance, by having compostable packaging, and once again also the composting system in place, because we see a lot of compostable packaging coming up.
We're not getting your screen.
Oh, Interesting.
So it's quite
I didn't
abstract.
stop sharing. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I stopped
let
sharing
me-
it when we were doing something.
Oh, that's
So
fine.
that's my bad. Let's
Sorry.
share it and we'll see it right away. Great.
You
Let's
can see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so basically you can see design and production is important, creating an effective after-use plastic economy as well, with reuse being really like the first thing that should be done, recycling, having compostable packaging as well, and the third one being, of course, the decoupling of plastic from fossil feedstock. So that means like reusing packaging or recycled content, basically, and if not possible, then using renewable materials. So these are basically the foundation of the new plastic economy, but this was translated into 6 vision points that are communicated across our 3 programs that Garance will go through after. But our 3 vision points, the first one, eliminates unnecessary and problematic packaging. So even if, of course, plastic has a lot of advantages, we want to eliminate packaging that is not necessary or that might pose difficulties to the recycling system or to our health, for instance. Then we want to have reuse model in place. And I mentioned before, the third one, having then 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging. The first one is having the system in place to reuse this packaging, to recycle it and to compost it. So the system in place is really important because you cannot just put on the market a reusable packaging and just hope it gets reused. You really need to work on like, how are you gonna get it back, for instance. So all this reverse logistic is very important to clean it and put it back to the market. And to my point on compostable packaging, we see a lot of compostable packaging in the market at the moment, but there is sometimes not the system in place to compost it. So you cannot just compost it at home. You really need to have sufficient heat. That's why you need to have it in an industrial composting. So compostable packaging should really be focused on few applications, and there should be the system in place to process it. Yes. Then what else?
So just Juliette, before you move
Yeah.
on, I have a question for you, which was asked from Anne-Laure even before the session on Slack. So one of the main targets of the new plastics economy is that all plastic packaging are reused, recycled, or composted in practice. Can you say a little bit more about how the government and the companies can ensure that this is actually going to happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And currently, yeah, like we see the recycling system is not working great, but we need first like really to design this packaging so that they can be recycled, because at the moment there are a lot of different plastic packaging, but not all of them can be recycled. You think about, for instance, flexible packaging. It cannot be recyclable, while PET bottles are most of the time, well, quite often recycled. So we really need to have these materials that are recyclable or reusable, and really have the infrastructure in place. So companies and government needs to put a lot of investment into this. And of course, government's role is also to make sure there are the policies in place that enable this whole system to be created, and also to push companies' responsibilities beyond just the project and the packaging, but really looking into, yeah, like it should be extended to after use, basically. Yeah, and actually coming back to whether we should ban plastic. Personally, Lila and Garance, feel free to intervene if I say anything wrong or you want to add anything. But I don't think it should be banned, because there are different type of package of plastic that we have seen are quite useful in some cases. And also it depends on the context. Like clearly governments have a role to play in, as I said, putting the right policies, but it depends on the context. So banning plastic, like single-use bottles, for instance, might not work in a country where there is no safe water to drink, for instance. But then plastic bag could work if there are alternatives in place. So it really depends on the context, and it should work really within the whole system. Yeah.
And another question that's coming in is the role of composting of packaging. And we also had a question on that on Slack earlier on the role of bioplastics and also how to avoid misunderstandings about that. Can you say a little bit more about that as well?
Sure. I mean, Lila, feel free to enter in because you are the specialist in bio-based plastic. But basically, bioplastic is quite a confusing term, so we should rather refer to it as either bio-based plastic, so looking at the source of the packaging of the plastic, or compostable plastic, which looks at the end of life, basically, of the plastic. And yeah, there is a big role really in educating and informing companies about how these packaging are used, because they should really be used for certain application, and they cannot replace, like they shouldn't replace single-use packaging, basically, because you still need to use materials, land, and energy to produce this packaging. So we should first look at eliminating what's possible and reusing and recycling. And as I mentioned also before, you really need to have the system in place. So for instance, in Cambodia, I saw a lot of bioplastic or compostable plastic, but I knew that there was no system in place. So it was, a bit enraging to see that, actually, because consumers pick it up a lot. They see bioplastic and they're like, oh yeah, that's great. We can actually use this plastic. It's not plastic. But actually, if there is no system in place to take care of it, the impact would be the same.
So that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Juliet. And indeed, it's great to see that we do have the vision that actually looks positively at the future, and that plastics do have a place going forward. But of course, we need to rethink the entire system around them to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. And you said reverse logistic is in place, and we do eliminate the plastics that are polluting or harmful. The question that I would like to bring to the audience right now, and feel free to share your brief comments in the chat, because it's really hard to read long comments while also listening to the webinar. So the question is, what do you think are enablers or barriers for us to move towards the better plastics economy? And I think, Juliet, we just lost your screen. Yeah. Yes, great. So share it in your comments. And at the same time, another question I have for you, Juliet, what about the trade-offs? Because to move to this vision, obviously that we'll have to consider a lot of different things, or as another Isabel actually asked on Slack, so how would the circular economy address trade-offs among impacts? And that could be between environmental impacts or environmental versus economic, or let's say social versus economic, because there are so many different decisions that we need to make, so many different factors to consider. So is there a way to do that, an efficient way to do that?
Yeah, I don't know if there is one way to do this, but circular economy should make sense when considering also on other environmental impacts, so climate change, for instance. We shouldn't just be replacing plastic for the sake of it. And then, for instance, what we see a lot is glass, but glass actually is quite heavy to transport. So maybe it doesn't make sense actually for companies to replace plastic packaging with glass if they have a lot of transportation involved. And actually we see, I mean, as far as I can see, really, companies are quite good at identifying, okay, like we don't want actually to just replace it, because we also are looking into our GHG emission, or greenhouse gases emission. So at first I was like a bit like, I didn't know what to think, whether companies would actually consider both criteria, but that climate change is definitely something that they are considering, along with reducing their plastic consumption. So it should work within like this framework. It shouldn't just be like we replace all plastic and that's it. And in terms of economics, so once again, like it should work within like the economy. And actually the circular economy has huge potential to provide actually economic growth. We see notably with TerraCycle actually reported their strongest sales growth during the pandemic, which is, I think for me, is a great news and show that this type of model can work and actually provide economic advantages. So yeah, it shouldn't be forgotten. And it's the idea of the circular economy is really like it's also about the economy, of course, right? So it should work within.
So we need to look into environmental and economical factors, both of them. And great, and now let's have a look at the chat and see what the comments are coming in regards to the barriers and enablers. And there are, well, consumerism. I saw something about oil being too cheap, and the more expensive the oil, the more expensive the plastic becomes, and it's more incentivized companies become to use that. Plastic that is already in the oceans and other waters, the cultural barriers.
There's a lot on regulation and legislation, either as barrier or as enabler.
Yeah. Anything to comment on, Juliet, from you or from the others in terms of what we see as, or perhaps what do you see as main enablers and main barriers? That would be the good way to frame it.
Yeah, for me, like the barrier is like, yeah, there is not the system in place yet. So it's very difficult. Like, for instance, when we talk about recycling, like the fact that, yeah, like there is a problem at the design phase, but also at the collection phase. And so it's really like looking up at all this. We need all actors to be involved, and it's how are we really incentivizing all these actors to work together and provide this new circular model. And enablers, yeah, these are, for instance, companies that come up with new projects, as Lila will mention later. I think we see a lot of new exciting companies coming up with models to reduce plastic packaging. And yeah, for me, they push also bigger corporations to do more, because if there is no alternative, then people will just accept it. But as innovators come up with innovation, basically, then companies like, oh yeah, so we need actually to do something about it. Otherwise, we might lose market share or sales. So
yeah, there's quite a bit that
I just wanted to jump in and add that one of the key enablers also is collaboration and coordination across the value chain. And that's really what the New Plastics Economy Initiative is about then, and creating. So a lot of what we do is bringing these big companies together, from, you know, plastic producers to a packaging converter to a retailer, and also then bringing in the recyclers, so they're having that conversation and together designing a system rather than designing in a fragmented manner. So a really key enabler is that collaboration, the cooperation, which has been missing, and that the New Plastics Economy then actually really tries to play a role in sort of filling that gap.
And I guess just to reiterate that we are focusing very much on the system, because not as much on, let's say, consumer choices or consumer behavior, because we believe that consumer choices are limited by the system that we are part on. So that's why we try to change the system. Some of the answers were in regards to behavior change. And, you know, when you think about the fact that in the previous slide that Juliet showed, that we have only 14% of all the plastic that is being recycled, while the recycling symbol has been around for more than 40 years. So it has taken 40 years for just a fraction of population to change their habits and start recycling. So indeed, so let's talk about the initiatives and the actions that we do in order to change the system of plastic. And Garance, this is where we move to you to tell us more about the couple of initiatives that we have, such as Global Commitment. Let's start with the Global Commitment, and then we will move to the Plastic Pact.
Thanks, Ilma, and thanks also, Lila, because that was a perfect transition to my point, and actually to the initiatives that we are working on within the New Plastics Economy team. So I saw earlier some discussions ongoing on the chat about which stakeholders need to be involved, and yeah, what is actually the role of collaboration, and also like it was great to have Juliette presenting the vision, but I saw also comment on, now that we have this vision, how do we actually implement it and what do we actually do with it? So basically, if we now think about how we want to move towards that vision, we're convinced that it will require a full system shift, so unprecedented levels of collaboration and of collective action. And this collaboration needs to be cross-value chain, so not only involving, as I saw earlier in the comments, not only manufacturers, which have an important role, but we also need to involve plastics producers, plastics retailers, and also brands, the whole value chain of the plastics. So in order to move towards the system, the new plastics economy has actually 3 main areas of focus, and they're, in a sense, our vehicles to accelerate the transition to a circular economy for plastics. And as Ilma just mentioned, the first one is the global commitment. So the global commitment unites businesses, governments, and other organizations, such as NGOs, behind the common visions and targets to address plastics waste and pollution at its source. So the global commitment was launched with UN Environment in October 2018, and there are now over 450 organizations from around the world who signed the global commitment, collectively representing more than 20% of the global plastics packaging value chain, which is quite massive. Out of those 450, we have over 150 that are businesses that have made concrete commitments and have set clearly defined and ambitious targets by 2025 to tackle plastics waste and pollution. And these targets are supported by common definition of the key concepts, and this is absolutely key, because basically we have all these organizations that are aligned behind the same vision and the same definitions, such as, so we basically, all those organizations agree on what recyclable means, what compostable means, and this alignment behind the definitions is absolutely crucial to make sure that we are all going towards the same direction for a circular economy for plastics. Regarding the global commitment, what is really interesting is that we see that already promising progress is being made. So the first global commitment progress report was launched in October last year, so October 2019. And there are 2 interesting highlights that I can maybe share with you. The first one is that we saw, so in October 2019 last year, that over a third of the relevant signatories already have active reuse pilots, meaning that there are more and more moving from single-use to reuse models. And by reuse, so Juliette mentioned it also earlier, I mean plastic packaging that is refilled and reused for the same application. One other interesting highlight is that on the design side, so I saw also a lot of chat ongoing on the design, and we saw also on the global commitment progress reports that companies in the global commitment have committed to have 100% of their plastic packaging to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And already today, we see that approximately 60% of signatories' plastic packaging is reusable, recyclable, or compostable in practice and at scale today. And by that, what I mean is that it should be proven that there is an existing collection, sorting, and recycling system in place that actually recycles or composts the packaging, and that is not only a theoretical possibility. So this is the progress that we start seeing within the global commitments. Obviously, we're just at the beginning of the journey, and it's absolutely crucial for those efforts to be accelerated and scaled up.
Mm-hmm. Are there any companies or even specific examples that you could mention just to bring this to life? Because it sounds incredible that, you know, all these companies have come together. They know what these shared definitions are when it comes to plastic, so that we all have the same language, and that they're moving towards reuse rather than single use. And they're thinking about new design solutions or new design ideas. Any specific examples just to bring it to life?
Yeah, I think one interesting example of a reuse pilot is, for instance, so Algramo, which is a Chilean company, small startup, I think. I mean, now they are getting bigger, but And basically, it's a reuse on the go model. I can share the link of the company with you. And basically, Nestle is now doing some pilots with Algramo, this company, to actually test and scale up reuse models. Other interesting things is that we see that more and more some brands are partnering and collaborating with retailers, and this collaboration between brands and retailers we see it as actually really important in scaling up some reuse models. So yeah, this is another trend we see. But for concerning reuse, and Lila will talk about it also later, I would invite you to check our reuse book that we published last year. And there are so many examples of different reuse models that exist and that are being scaled up at the moment.
Yes, and I'm sure our colleagues will share the link to reuse on the chat right away.
Thanks, colleagues.
So the global commitment operates on the global scale. So what do we do on a smaller scale, let's say more regional or even national scale? So what kind of initiatives and actions happen there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when we know that the plastics challenge is a global challenge and that it's absolutely crucial to have this common vision, the way we get there and the actual solutions on the ground, we know that they will be different in Chile, in France, or in South Africa, just because the local contexts are so different. So if like to bring it to life and to give you an example, for instance, in Chile, the recycling infrastructure is not developed as much as it is in Europe. There is a very important informal waste sector, meaning that there are some waste pickers that actually collect waste and bring the waste to recycling plants, and they actually live out of this activity. And so because Chile does not have as much as existing recycling infrastructure, they also have some great opportunity to be more innovative, so to directly look at upstream models and to go towards reuse, for instance. So this shows perfectly that we see the need for on-the-ground solutions that are tailored to local context. And this is why, alongside the global commitment and the global level actions that we're taking, we also have a network of national and regional initiatives that is called the Plastics Pact Network. And I was telling you just earlier that we have 3 initiatives, and this is the second one. So the Plastics Pact Network. So basically, just to explain a little bit, how does it work? So we have 7 pacts that are launched in the world at the moment, and many more developing in the pipeline from all different regions around the globe. And every pact is led by a local independent partner organization and is a national platform for local stakeholders. So it means that it unites businesses, government, and NGOs at the local level to work together towards a circular economy for plastics in a local context. One pact, for instance, that is being developing at the moment and that will be added to those 7 pacts that you can already see on the map is the ANZPAC Plastics Pact, which brings together Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island nations to work towards a circular economy for plastics. So it's very powerful to have actually all those different pacts in different countries working towards the same vision and telling the same stories, but finding solutions that work on the ground and engaging with local actors.
And it's really interesting to look at the map and see that definitely there is a cluster in Europe, and then we have a piece in Chile and in South Africa, and you mentioned the New Zealand, Australia region. What about Asia, for instance, and referring to, let's say, Juliet's story and her experiences in Cambodia and the fact that so many Asian countries are the ones that import a lot of plastic waste. So are there any upcoming national plastic pacts in Asia, or what's happening in Asia?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question that we actually get all the time. Asia is definitely a place where we are looking for developing new initiatives. And probably if you look at our website towards the end of the year, you will be able to see very exciting news. But yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned that there is this cluster in Europe. The dynamic that we see actually is that whenever we would launch a pact in a region, it would act as a lighthouse in the whole region. So then many other countries would start to pick up and want to do the same things and develop the same kind of initiatives. So we launched the UK Plastics Pact as the first one in 2017 in the UK. And basically from there, a lot of pacts starting to develop also in Europe. And now we're starting to see the same dynamic in Latin America or also in Africa. Now that there is the Chile Plastics Pact and the South African Plastics Pact, we see other initiatives that want to get ongoing in the same region. And I'm seeing a comment about the US also in the chat box. It's definitely, North America is definitely also a region that we're looking into at the moment.
Thanks, Garance. I have to say, I was very itchy to ask you more questions, and also noticing the questions that are coming in from the audience, and time is pressing on, so I will thank you so much for discussing what's going on in EMF with regards to creating alignment here. And the other aspect, I suppose, we need to highlight in the work that you're doing is also the importance of innovation, and how fundamental this is to meeting the commitments with all the signatories that you have, but also how innovation is fundamental to the aspects of circular economy in general. So we'd like to focus the rest of the session now to look at how innovation is an important element in the new plastics economy work that you're doing. And be lovely to hear a little bit more from Lila on how would you describe the work that you're doing on innovation, and anything you'd like to highlight on that.
Yeah, great. Hi. Great, if we can just get, oh, perfect, that slide down. I will bring up another slide in a moment to talk through innovation a little bit. So yeah, it's obviously been a theme that we've been touching upon throughout the talks, and it'll be nice to delve into a little bit here. We do have a new resource coming out later in the year on innovation then, which will give a lot more details. And please have a look at the reuse book for sort of the type of innovation that we support. Innovation really is fundamental to the circular economy because it's the way that we, rather than moving backwards, you know, in terms of moving back to models that we previously have when we know that our current ones aren't working, it's innovation that allows us to move forward in a way that does it better. And it's also what provides us with an opportunity. And it's really important here that it's not only an environmental opportunity to do things differently, but actually a business opportunity. And again, that's why it's fundamental to the circular economy, because it's in innovation that you can develop new business models. You can actually engage with the consumer differently. You can actually think about what are you trying to achieve with plastic packaging. Ultimately, you're trying to deliver a product or an experience and value to a consumer. So innovation is what allows you to decide to do that differently. So you're still achieving your business objectives. You can actually do it in a new way that engages new people, and you can do it in a way that is compatible with, you know, sort of our environmental boundaries and how we need to be operating. And so I wanted to share with you then something we've been developing around the mindset for innovation, because it's a word that came up a little bit earlier as well. And we really do believe that that's fundamental. It's the way that we think about innovation. And this is what we try to support our signatories to the new plastics economy, different sort of programs as well. And it's about sort of rethinking. We've been talking about eliminating waste by design, and actually moving beyond either just rethinking the packaging, the material, and moving beyond just rethinking, you know, sort of how we deal with waste at end of life. So I've seen on the chat group quite a lot of discussion about chemical recycling and things like that. Really interesting topics, and we won't have time to sort of fully go into my thoughts on that today. They will play a role. But as I was saying, what I had, you know, sort of the epiphany when I was in my PhD was the fact that there's so much innovation and opportunity upstream. So before a product and a packaging even gets to a consumer. And that's where we really have a chance to make a huge impact. And so it's about, there's an aspect of rethinking the packaging, but this comes into the concept, you know, even something like, can a packaging be edible? You know, that's completely rethinking the concept of a packaging. It's also rethinking a product. So can you think about formulation? You know, something like a shampoo, at the moment we have a packaging for it because it's a liquid and it's just a function of then you need something to contain it. Whereas you can start to then question, what am I trying to deliver? I'm trying to deliver a cleaning product. Can I look at having a solid product? Can I look at someone having a reusable bottle in their bathroom and me sending them a tablet that they put into water that produces their cleaning solution and actually increases convenience and is now useful for works well with e-commerce? And then can I rethink the system? So actually looking at thinking the business model, looking at something like localization of production. So a lot of packaging is required purely because of the way our supply chains work. So can you look at moving towards a localized production? So an example is in Indonesia, there's a startup called Kesapia. They're basically developing direct connections between farmers and inner city dwellers who want food. It all happens within a 60-kilometer radius, and you completely change the need for packaging just by changing now the distance that it's traveling versus trying to work on the packaging material or the collection of the packaging at the end. This is a really important mindset shift in terms of what you're trying to solve, and that you're trying to deliver product and value versus just trying to deliver the packaging. So yeah, I just wanted to take you through the mindset. I'll take a pause there briefly, and then we can jump into some examples on some different sectors.
We just started to hear a lot of noise, so maybe I'm just going to mute Paul and then unmute you, Leila, yes, great. Okay. So the comment I wanted to make is just to make a reference to one of the previous webinars when we were speaking about the design, and in the circular design we have this approach to zoom in and zoom out, where we zoom into the needs of the user and actually think what is the function that the user needs to be provided with, and then we zoom out and look at the system. And it seems like the same kind of thinking is underpinning the innovation model for plastics as well.
No, absolutely. And it is that fact that you're still delivering utility. So this is also how we help a lot of our businesses thinking about it, is that you're not actually saying that you need to not deliver value or not deliver utility. It's about pinpointing what it is that you need to deliver and then how you do that in a new way. So absolutely.
So maybe just to, again, bring this one to life, we could just mention a couple of examples of, let's say you mentioned the shampoo bottle before, and what could be the alternatives to the shampoo bottle that could be most considered to be most circular.
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned shampoo because it was on my mind, because I have actually got some slides then on shampoo, and I'll bring those up now. So yeah, these, I also chose shampoo as an example because there are a lot of different current examples existing of how you can do it differently. So here in the background, we've got Lush, which probably many people are familiar with because it's actually amazing. They started in the UK just as one sort of backyard store, and they're now a multinational global company. And they've built their business on doing something like shampoo differently. All of their products are solid. And they've also expanded then into looking at deodorants and toothpaste tabs. And again, they're actually going through a huge period of growth at the moment. And yeah, so I think this is just a really nice example of how you can create business value through rethinking your product. And we're seeing many other companies start to sort of look at this idea now. Up in the top right-hand corner, we've got something called Nobo Drops. And so they were actually a few years ago, got quite a lot of funding on the US version of Shark Tank. So one of the, where you pitch your idea and people then decide to invest. And they just closed off now a Series A round of venture capital funding. So for people that are sort of into the investing and how these innovations sort of gain money and grow. And yeah, so they've got a it's a very concentrated product in a dissolvable film. And so then you end up with these individual portion sizes, and they've now connected with a hotel distributor in Europe. So the idea is, again, maybe some aspect of targeting individual consumers, but then actually plugging into something like the hotel industry, and how can you help them deliver sort of shampoos and goods like that differently. And down in the bottom left-hand corner, this is very much concept stage. It's called Soap Bottle. And I don't know that it's the innovation that's going to change all of this, but I just wanted to include it in terms of that mindset shift of rethinking the concept of packaging. So it's a bottle that's made out of soap, and then you contain like the liquid contents inside, but basically you use up the shampoo and then you can use the bottle itself as a soap bar. So it's sort of that combining two concepts or ideas into one, and challenging the concept of packaging. And then I also wanted to bring in reuse models, because we absolutely think there's a huge opportunity in reuse. As I said, we've got the reuse book, and we've also quantified that there's a $10 billion opportunity in engaging with reuse models. And we've seen most of the big partner organizations that we work with set reuse targets and also start working on some of these models. So actually on the right-hand side is called Hair Refillery, and this is a Unilever initiative. So it was based in the Philippines, and the idea was that they had all of their top performing hair care brands that you could actually come in and bring. You could either bring your own bottle and fill it up, or you gave a bottle to them to exchange and you took a new one and filled it up, and they had a really positive response to that. And on the left-hand side, we've got a similar sort of concept called Cozy running in France. So yeah, those, as I was saying, shampoo and some of those products, if we've got time, we can have a quick look at beverages, but yeah, because there's lots.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but just to make a reference to what we were talking about before, and I think Juliet was answering the question about the trade-offs and how we can, you know, have more environmentally friendly options, but also not lose the economic benefit. And especially from the company's perspective, you need to find new ways to create the economic value. And it seems like innovation is the key in order to do that. And models such as reuse can provide an alternative business model, an alternative way to create value for you as a company. There was one I think the most creative question I saw coming from the Slack earlier. It's from Isabella, and she was asking, if you were a CEO of a plastic material, if you were CEO of a plastic raw material producer, given everything that's happening in the current system, what would you do?
So I would say in that case, it probably is looking at recycling. Actually reuse as well. And I would probably look at Borealis, who's one of our core. And yeah, they're basically, and are also looking at reuse models with interest, because they see that's where the future of their business is going. So yeah, I think we've got real life examples of what CEOs of those sorts of companies are thinking about.
Yeah, and another question which I think a lot of people have in their minds, given the current situation right now, is the effects of COVID-19 is going to have on the new plastics economy going forward. And so let's say from your perspective, and maybe also looking at it through the innovation lens, what would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely as a new reality with the COVID-19 and what we're entering and operating in. And this is where innovation is key in terms of, again, thinking about the functionality that we need to provide. So hygiene is obviously going to become more important than ever, but it doesn't mean that these new models aren't going to work. It's actually then about something like Loop is working great, where it's a delivery to your home door. We see other models where it's, you know, anyway, they're integrating sort of hands-free refills. So it's actually going to be, again, pinpointing what are the needs of the user, and they'll have slightly shifted, you know, and certain ones will have been exemplified. But innovation can certainly help us sort of meet those challenges then, again, while still moving forward in the new plastics economy vision.
Great, thank you. And I think we're approaching that moment when we need to start wrapping things up, and we have 2 minutes to 4. And I guess thinking about this entire webinar and what we heard today, so things that stand out for me is that definitely the current system needs to be disrupted and changed because it's not working. And you know, the example that we have had 40 years recycling symbol for 40 years, and we're only recycling 14% of all the plastic out there. And in order to do that, we need a new vision, which our new plastics economy report has provided us with. And it's all about eliminating the plastic that is polluting or doesn't work, and finding ways to innovate and finding ways to reuse or circulate plastic that is useful and should remain in the system. And some of the great things that we're doing here at the foundation include global commitment, which brings alignment on the global level, and also national pacts and regional pacts that take into consideration the local realities in order to change the system. And of course, innovation underpins it all. So I think that's it really. So thank you very much to our great 3 speakers. And I think just a couple of things to say to everyone in terms of what's going to happen next. So first of all, as you know, we are in the weeks when we have double webinars. So there's an alternative webinar happening right now on cities and policy making. And therefore the homework we have for you this week is to go back to your learning trios and have a conversation in your learning trio about the topics that you heard today, and then write a reflective piece and share it on the Slack channel, up to 500 words about things that you learned, things that you heard that were new, things that you perhaps disagreed with, or things that fascinated you. So go back to your learning trio and have that discussion and share it with us. And next week, we will continue with the double webinars, and we have fashion and food. So I think I'll be back with you for the fashion webinar. It will happen at the regular time at 3 p.m. GMT +1. And you will receive the links if you haven't had them yet. So that's it really. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Monica, for co-hosting with me. And thank you, Leila, Garance, and Juliet for being the great speakers and sharing the knowledge and experience that you have.